Welcome to everyone. This is Beyond Representation, Dismantling White Supremacy in Mainstream Children's Media. This is a couch conversation. This is a panel discussion. It's in between a couch conversation and a panel discussion. And we have so my name is Kiana Saxon, the CEO and founder of Kidogo Productions. We also have Thato Mwosa. She's an artist. She's an educator, founder of Tuli Media. We have Dr. Charmain Jackman of InnoPsych and Yawa Deboe of Kids.Think.Art. I welcome all of you to this space, and I hope that we have an engaging conversation. Feel free to use the chat function, which is at the top left-hand corner of your screen. It is next to the navigation button. And if you want a fuller screen, you can press that navigation button, which would remove some of the visuals. And then you can also press the settings wheel, which is at the top right hand of your screen, and click full screen. When we ask for engagement, you can either use the chat function or you can step up to the mic. So you have to click on the step to the mic function, and then we can hear and see you. While you're in the audience, we cannot hear or see you. All right, so let's just jump into what we're talking about with a little icebreaker question. What was your favorite movie, book, film, cartoon, whatever? What was your favorite piece of children's content that you remember and that impacted you the most? And we're going to start with Thato.
Oh, my favorite. When I think about books, honestly, the book that is the most profound for me was Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, which we had to read at high school. I think it made me, after reading so many European books at the time, children's books, by the time I got to high school, and when I came across that book, I saw myself in it. It made me understand my world, and it spoke to me. I related to the characters, and I think it's still a book that I actually just bought it recently for my sons because I feel like it's one of the most important books that we need to read, especially Black people in this world, to understand. I love how it touches on colonialism in Africa. Understand what happened when the white settlers came in, and how Africa is the way it is. It really explains a lot. It explains our current situation in Africa. But it's a book that you can read at a young age. I read it in high school, so I think that's the book that is still my favorite, my go-to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thato. And I love seeing Simone walk in there. That was great. Dr. Charmain, go ahead.
She had to deliver because I forgot to bring my visuals. So I remember reading Things Fall Apart in high school as well. So that was definitely a pivotal moment for me. But this one is called, I don't know if you could see it. This is the Lady Bird Sunstart books. And it's a series, or 6 books. And these were, I remember fondly reading these books as a kid when I first started to read. And what I loved about it is that, I'll show this one. There are pictures of the beach, and there's a little Black girl and a little Black boy. And I grew up in Barbados, so I remember reading this and seeing myself in books and seeing my culture reflected in the books. And so as when I had children, I found the series, and so I bought all 6 of the books so my kids could read that. So those are some early books I remember reading. I'm a reader, so I love to read, and I explored a lot of different books. Growing up on the island, we definitely had a lot of British influence, so there's a lot of Enid Blyton, Nancy Drew, but from very early on, I could see myself represented in the books, and so this is a series that I really hold on to.
Thank you, Dr. Charmain. And Yawa.
Thanks. That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing your experience, Dr. Charmain and Thato as well. So on my side, my experience has been a little bit different. I grew up, so I was born in Togo in West Africa, but I grew up in France. So growing up, I didn't see as much books with like black character, I will say. But some of the things that I was really relating to is so well like a comic books called Yoko Tsuno. So it was actually like a Japanese character. So it's a comic book. So it was later on. I was really into that. And then later on, I was like a fan of Little Woman. So that's like a big book that I'm still referring to today, and I had like no problem identifying myself with some of the character. So that's very interesting. That's kind of my journey. So I'm very excited about learning more about Thato and Dr. Charmain and their background as well.
Yes, and so and for me, I read everything. I C.S. Lewis. I mean, there's and Judy Blume. There, I think I was very used to going into different worlds and extremely different worlds from mine. I remember reading Alex Haley's Roots, and that was like, I think that was probably the heaviest book that I read. Um, it was some very, very difficult subject matter, but I was enthralled. All right, so make sure you put your comments in the chats. We want to hear from you. And I convene these women because we are all Black women. We're all professionals. We all have these ways of impacting the world, but we come from different places. I'm African American. Tato's from South Africa. We have Dr. Charmain from Barbados. We have Yawa from France by way of Togo. I mean, we have such a rich history and ancestry, and to convene us all on one couch to talk about how we're going to carry children's media forward. It's a real honor. So let's jump right into Dr. Charmaine. What is white supremacy? Why do we even include this in the title? You're muted.
Yeah, and I love that we're starting right here with this big word. Sometimes I think white supremacy scares people away, but it's really important to bring it into the space because it impacts our world and the way, in so many ways, right? Very, very explicit and implicit ways. So when I think about white supremacy, I think about the policies and practices and cultural beliefs that uphold white and whiteness as superior, right? And as we're thinking about children's books and children's media, it is very present there. And so, again, as I talk about my experience growing up in Barbados, while the country is 95% Black, um, for sure, the few percentage of white folks held the money. And even though we all our prime ministers have been Black, we also know that money and power really intercede and intersect in very different ways. And so as we think about children's media, literature, books, I invite you to think about, when you think about those books that you might have read or had access to, what were the characteristics or the racial characteristics of the main characters, right? Whose stories were often featured and highlighted. And definitely through that lens, and I'll share on the next slide, we think about the diversity in books has evolved. But in 2012, which is not pictured here, when my daughter was about 2 years old, my son is 2 years old. He was born in 2010. And so this really got me on this journey, as I love to read and I wanted to pass that on to my children. And so, like, when I was looking for books, it was really challenging to find books that represented by kids in ways that represented the full range of their experience, that showed them in positive light, right? And here we see this data, right? And back in 2012, the data showed that 93% of the books featured white characters. In this graphic here on the left, you see in 2015, 73% white characters, 12.5% animals and inanimate objects. And I really want to highlight that because as you look then at the Black Asian, Latinx, and American Indian characters represented in books. Those in total often are less or about on par with inanimate objects and animals. So our stories are not even as important as animals and inanimate objects. Fast forward 5 years to 2020, I'm actually surprised by this statistic. I'm challenging that a little bit, but you see 41% of the books feature white characters. Animals and inanimate objects have skyrocketed to 29%, right? So there's a way in which we can avoid talking about race and ethnicity, right? But let's show animals and inanimate objects in that way. Books about Black characters have increased to 12%, and so we see the percentages increasing. One of the things I know Thato will talk about later, as well as we're thinking about who authors these books. Are they actually in the voices of the people who are being represented? So that's one piece that I really want to highlight. And then my expertise on this panel is as a psychologist. So I want to talk also about what is the impact on having access to books where your identities are represented. Often you might hear people talk about mirrors and windows. This is a concept that's probably about maybe it's older than 4 or 5 years ago, but it really came to my attention about 4 or 5 years ago. So windows are where you see, you have an opportunity to see other children and other cultures represented. And mirrors are your representation, right? You see yourself represented in the book or the media that you're watching. And so you might hear librarians and elementary school teachers and maybe high school now talking about making sure that books have mirrors and windows for children to see themselves and to see other cultures represented. So that's definitely, I know we're going to be talking about strategies later on, but that's definitely a focus for you as a parent to really hold on and think about as you're looking through the books that you're providing for your children. So why is this important, right? It is important because we know that if you don't see yourself represented, you often can't imagine yourself in those roles. But more harmful, as we'll show in a few minutes, the impact of either not seeing yourself represented, or if you are represented, you're represented in a negative role. And so the impact of these messages can have a significant impact on our identity, our sense of self, our self-esteem. Part of white supremacy really focuses on a message of hatred of self, particularly for Black and Brown folks or Indigenous folks, right? So there is an intentional design to keep us separated and to also to malign things that are natural, are part of our history, a part of our ancestry. So that was by design. And so we think about like examples of colorism, right? We're kind of this self-hatred of our own skin, our darker skin, right? So that is the impact of white supremacy. And we see that very clearly, or we will see that very clearly in children's media and books. It also impacts a sense of belonging. And please keep me honest with time. So if I need to go ahead quickly, let me know. It also impacts belonging. So if you might see yourself represented as not fitting in or being othered. We talk a lot, particularly for Asian youth, the perpetual foreigner, right? That you somehow weren't born here. We see the impact on school and grades. When students don't see themselves reflected positively, it can impact their self-esteem, that can impact their academic performance, their behavior. And sometimes it also impacts the expectations that teachers have of us, right? The stereotypes. So these are all messages and messaging that comes with white supremacy. And the final impact, particularly as a psychologist, is then these can lead to anxiety, depression, racial stress, and at most harmful, suicide. And what we're seeing in Black and Brown kids, the suicide rates for 5 to 12 years old are increasing and are actually twice as high for white kids. So we're seeing this also impact our children's self-esteem to the point where it's causing racial stress and tension. So I want to pause there and turn it over to Keeana, who'll talk about how this then looks in media. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you so much, Thato. I mean, Dr. Charmain. I'm having to navigate and try to find my presentation as I fill in the gap here. So we talked about mirrors and windows for literature, but there are also mirrors and windows for our films and cartoons. And so, as far as the data is concerned, we know that just as there are characters that are inanimate, characters that are white, there's these percentages show the same kind of disparity in film and TV. So we just look at this pie graph. 35% of the characters that we see in TV and film are animals. 27% humans, 24% other, which is like plants and robots, and 14% non-humans. And so you think, maybe 14% it's not bad. And, at least in the United States, the percentage of black and brown of blacks in the U.S. hover around that percentage. But what about the quality of that representation? And that's where we get into a lot of trouble. So I just wanted to show you a clip of um, it's like a compilation. I have a compilation of characters that I have seen over and over in media, and it was actually pretty shocking for me to see it all in one place, as I began putting it together. So it's only about 15 minutes, 15 seconds. I'm going to show it to you as soon as I get it on. Maybe it's going to play, maybe it's not going to play. Another clip that I can show you, even though the compilation is not playing, is of Smurfettes, and I didn't think that Smurfs were going to be particularly harmful, but here we have another clip, if I can find it. Dr. Charmain, would you mind filling in as I
Absolutely. And I know the clip that you really wanted to show, really, when you talk about quality of the characters, right? So what we often see, and I know your part is really highlighting, right, that connection to dark, dark skin or darkness equaling evil, and white skin and whiteness equaling good. Can you connect to that and post in the chat? Like, does this resonate with you when you think about the characters that you've seen, either in your own upbringing or in your investigation of media for your children? What are some of the things that you're seeing? How does this playing out for you? Technology is not on our side
It's
today.
not on our side today. It's okay. You can step to the mic and we can talk about these things. And if you can recall things in your, um, you know, we've seen clips in our lives. We can talk about it in real time. For me, one clip that I have talked about before is My Little Pony. I mean, My Little Pony is not something that is it's pretty innocuous to me, I thought. But there's this character that is the bad pony, and we can all guess, like, what color is the bad My Little Pony. Well, it's black. It's black, and it always accompanied by it is always accompanied by ominous music. So in comes the black pony, and and it has like a dark purple outline, and it's supposed to be the pony that you fear. It's supposed to be the antagonist. It's supposed to be the one that you are supposed to triumph over, control, and win and kill. So essentially, the Smurfs clip that I was going to show was the blonde Smurf is this, it's the great Smurf. It's the Smurf that we find all beautiful and has long blonde hair, but it turns into the Smurf that is to be hated and feared when the hair turns dark black, and that is the signal, and the skin turns darker, and that is supposed to signal to the child that this is the character that is supposed to be feared. It is supposed to be the character that you're supposed to run away. Like the Smurfs literally are running away from this character. And so imagine the impact of a child who's watching that and says, and because children's brains, they're pretty logical. They say, okay, well, if we're supposed to fear characters that have darker skin, what about mine? Am I supposed to be afraid of people who look like me? Am I supposed to, if are people supposed to be afraid of me? And that's the kind of logic that needs to be absolutely eradicated. We need to be able to find a different way of displaying, showing, demonstrating what badness looks like. And that is the power of the creator. That's in the power of the writer. That's in the power of the director. When we distill, reduce badness with darkness, and we do it in our language as well, it is too easy to make a logical leap that people in real life who are of darker hues are also to be feared and also supposed to be conquered. I mean, there's never, especially in the US, there's always going to be the hero who's going to triumph over the bad.
Yeah, I think I really like what you're talking about, like Kiana here. I feel like in on the other side, like in the art industry, or I'll say like museum and stuff, we there is like a very similar dynamic where either black is bad, or black is exotic as well, but there is like no like real conversation about what it means. So that's like really dangerous when you're taking your kids, for example, to the museum, or you're taking your kids to an art place, and that's the kind of conversation that I'm glad that we're having, and that you outlined like on this, Kena. So I mean, for us, on the outside, or like just like some of the things that I've noticed, actually like really recently run like a survey to like I interview more than 100 people, and to try to figure out like what kind of art do they recognize. And when we look at like these slides that you're showing, Kina, thank you so much for that. Like we analyze that like 90% of the voters to the survey recognize the artwork on the left. So it's really like artwork by white artists, and only 10% are able to recognize or even name some of the artwork on the right here of the screen that are made by artists of color, and not small artists. Like some of them are really known classical artists. So, and some of them are emerging, of course. But that's a big gap. It's like a 90-10. That's even more than the 80-20 rules that we usually apply to most of the things. So that's really like jarring to me. And when you dig further, like 75% said that the artwork on the right like resonate the most with our kids. So that's really like the artwork like by artists of color, but only 25% said that the artwork on the left resonates the most with our kids. So again, like it doesn't make sense. It's really, we know for sure that like the number here like doesn't make sense. So there is like definitely like a gap that we're trying to figure out and dig into and trying to correct. So that's really some of the things that I realized like lately by running like Kids.Think.Art and this survey as well. So that's really interesting. Something that I wanted to share with the audience as well.
And I think, Yawa, your data really talks about that, highlights that internalized oppression, right? That we
Mm-hmm.
kind of believe the lies, right? That our work, our art, our stories are not valid or not to be held to this high standard. And stories and art, classics. I don't like classics at all because I know people like that's all white.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but those are the standards that we learned, right? This is what good art is. This is what
yeah,
sophisticated art is. And so we
exactly.
really needed to challenge those thinkings, those subtle and explicit messages.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so right. But I'm curious about Thato as well. So tell me more about you on your side. Like, what have you noticed on the book side?
So yeah, well, we're going to just there's some things in the chat that we just want to highlight. Stella Rupia says, I've noticed some shows that have a Black character. Normally, the character is not in a position of a problem solver, but rather one who makes silly mistakes. So, Stella, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, what I have said is that the quality of representation is suspect. You know, the Black characters in TV, film, literature, they're often silly, off to the side, silent, or stereotyped. And so I absolutely agree that this is the something that is a problem that needs to be addressed. And yes, I will put the Instagram link in the chat as soon as I figure it out. So yes, now Tato.
Yeah, I think, I mean, thank you so much. I've been sitting and listening and learning some more. I took some statistics from you, Dr. Charmain, the updated one, 2020. Wow, diversity. I do remember when my firstborn, he was born in 2005, and how hard it was for me to find books for him. It was like I had to like dig, and I still think that when it comes to Black boys, it's still harder to find books that have protagonists that are young Black boys than Black girls. So for him, I had more. I remember just walking into Barnes and Noble and seeing all this books with a white protagonist on the cover, and I was really really cautious and about until I met Jason Reynolds, who I teach with at Leslie, and I was so happy. So I started buying his books, and he has a lot of them. For those who don't know, Jason Reynolds books. Um, but my daughter, who was born in 2013, she's now 8. There's a lot of books. I find that there is some kind of like a shift. There's like a big awareness to diversify children's books. A lot of organizations have been doing a push for that. So that's been really great to see, because I feel like I could buy 100 books that have like Black girls on the cover right now. But anyway, so right now I want to talk about who gets to tell our stories, right? How do we take control of our narrative? How do we make sure as an artist? So just to give you a little background about myself, I'm an artist. I wrote a children's book called 14 African Women Who Made History, but I'm a filmmaker by training. And I'm also an artist. Some of my work you can see in the back, if you can see at the background. I make Black ballerinas. I've been doing that for over the years. So I've always been conscious about diversity in literature, but also in art and in film. And my current film right now is a coming of age story that I had to write because I felt like there was a lack of representation in coming of age movies that center young Black girls. So I wrote one, and it's out. It's called Memos of a Black Girl. So that's been my push, just to kind of find where there's lack. I feel like if you have a voice, you can create something, whether it's a book that I wrote because there was nothing that celebrated phenomenal contemporary African women, and I decided to write that. So I will share a little bit about those projects later on. But I wanted to just do a little slideshow that is mainly visual. But before I share it, I will read. Let me see if I can do this. Hopefully it will work with me here. All right, I think I got it. Hold on. All right. Can you see it?
We can, Thato. Thank you.
You can see it. I can see myself, but I'll keep
We can see it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can see myself, but that's fine. I wanted to share first one of my favorite authors, Chimamanda. I know most of you know Chimamanda. I wanted to share her quote from her TED Talk. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. The Danger of a Single Story. Stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. And I wanted to start with these images, the images depiction of Africa. And this is images from a book called book called Tintin, which is a French book. And these images were also common in America. I think if you look at like the depiction of Black people from the early on, it's exactly like Black people are depicted close to like looks like monkeys, like big lips, big red lips, and just kind of not in control. They don't have autonomy. They are merely projected as depicted as victims. So you can see here, Tintin comes to save the day. This African man doesn't know, what is happening with his. The African woman doesn't know what is happening with his, with her husband. You can see Dr. Seuss early artwork here. He later on regretted his early artwork, and obviously over the years he came to understand how problematic it was. But you can see some of they're really similar. Tintin is a French book, and this is an American book, but the images are the same. And obviously, Africans or Black people are depicted, barefoot, kind of set, especially when we look at children's books set in Africa, they have like the similar tropes. But I'll go back to what I picked up from Dr. Charmain's presentation. Over the years, there's been a push, and I see the difference just based on the gap between my firstborn, who was born 2005, and my daughter, who was born in 2013. I see there is a push to increase diversity, but who's really telling our story? Out of the 12% characters that are Black, who created them, and who gets to write them, and who gets to get published, and who gets to get money to produce shows with that. So that's my big question as an artist. So these are some of the images that some of the books that I've come across that are set in Africa. As you can see, if you can read the synopsis, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to show you that even though there are more diverse books coming up, we can see the trend of where Black, brown authors are not getting the opportunity, or they're not getting as much opportunity as white authors who are actually writing stories that have Black protagonists. And the other thing that I want you guys to pay attention to is the image, like how are these Black characters depicted. For me, as someone from Africa, I can see the 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 images that perpetuate in children's media. For me, is like always set in primitive Africa. Always the character is barefoot. I mean, I'll go through all the things, but you can just identify that set. You know, they live in mud houses. You never see images of contemporary Africa barefoot. Um, and when you read this, this is about kids that show up at a school. And I was looking at the line when it said, when he and the other children arrive at the schoolyard, they find no classroom, no desk, just the teacher. And the teacher said, "We'll build our school." She says, "There's our first lesson." You know, like the story of poverty, scarcity, like that that is sort of always the story of Africa, right? And you can see it translated into children's books. Um, so these are some of the things that I picked up just looking at various children's books. From like majority of them are actually written by white authors, and you can see like the tropes. Certain rural Africa victims. Hunger, themes are hunger, poverty, barefoot, half-dressed, torn clothes, primitive, backward, mud huts, thatched hut. So it's almost like that's the story of Africa, but it's a one-sided story of Africa. We never see like the developed Africa, the kids that are in a classroom that is maybe air conditions, that are wearing uniforms, that are wearing shoes, that are, so.
And Tato, can I add to that thing as well? Can you flip back? Because so this came up for my kids, for my daughter when she was in kindergarten. And
I remember
there was a
that.
unit, you remember that? I was hot. There was a unit on Africa. And all of these tropes, all the images were that. And I was like, not okay, not on my watch, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just for their classroom. Now, this was in a public place. So people were coming in and out. And no one said anything. And all of these all of those things you have listed there were exactly what the images you were seeing.
Yeah, but you know,
And it was two safari people, two little safari people, white, dressed in safari. And right again, the white now was the safari savior, whatever that was.
Yes. And no one said anything because it's nominal. It's nominal. It's the norm, right? Like it's if you are used to these images, that is your truth. Like they don't know that the other image of Africa or the other Africa exists, or Africa is well-rounded. And I'm not denying these images. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the images, but when the story is so one-sided, I mean, that's what Chimamanda said, the danger of a single story. When the story is just like this collection of these tropes, and it keeps perpetuating for 100 years, from the time of Tintin to the contemporary time, and you haven't changed the story. I avoid this for my kids. We go to the village when we go to Africa, but we also go to the city. They, like they see all of Africa, and they know that Africa is not just this this image. And we see this is common. I challenge all of you to go through books that are set in Africa that you have in your house and see if you can see a list of this. And then just to, because I know I have limited time, I just wanted to show you. So now we're getting to a point where there is a recognition that diversity, we need to diversify our literature, right? But I find that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like these are positive, these are actually positive characters. There isn't, these images are not problematic at all, but you can see that others are getting opportunity to create for us.
And profiting. And let's be real, they're profiting from our stories.
Yes, because there is now the need for diversity. Instead of supporting creators of color or writers of color, now you're still supporting. And that to me is white supremacy. And I would like to say, my daughter loved these characters. She has a collection of these books. And we love Miles Morales. But I just wanted to highlight that, like that little problematic thing.
Right, Tato. And that's the thing that we want to make sure that all of us are more aware of. Now, how can we, as parents, how can we ensure that our children are getting, a diverse set of content? How can we don't have the time to
Yeah.
constantly look or who's the director, who's the writer? What can we do? What kinds of things can we do?
I would say, and I would just kind of like some of the things that I do as like when I buy my children's books, I always look who wrote the story, because for me it's like when you we write from an authentic place, and I'm cautious about if someone is writing a black story, I want to know who wrote it. And that is important to me because I'm also a creator and a writer, and sometimes I don't get opportunity to or get financial support to write those stories. I had to self-fund my book to write it, because no one believed that a story of contemporary Africa, of African women who are presidents and who have won Nobel Prizes, deserve to be told. And I had to actually publish it myself because I'm like, hell yeah, it deserves to be told. Anyway, so I just want to go through some of the things that I like to see, and these are some of like just I look to see who wrote the story and who are they, and this is just one of the things that I do. So to segue, I'm gonna stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? Did I stop sharing? Okay, great. Um, so yeah, I think we just need to be cautious. For me, I ended up creating writing my book, and just because I felt like I needed to tell that story. But also, one of the things that I did when I found out that we don't have a lot of black ballerinas when I was decorating my child's bedroom, I ended up creating the black ballerinas.
Right.
And now a lot of you have the black ballerinas in your walls. So through Tuli and through my book and through my movie, I continue to tell those stories.
Exactly, Tato. And that's the thing that we have to do. We're at the point in this discussion where we talk about the things that we do in order to fill the gap, the things that we've done in order to solve the problem. We've identified the problem, we've defined it. Now, how are we solving it? So Tato, she is a creator's creator. I mean, she's film, art, everything that we can think of. And for me, Kidogo.tv is one where I'm curating the content. Yes, we are creating it as well, but it's really a place where creators who have the same vision that I do, we want to be able to affirm Black cultures for young kids. We just finished our first live show at 2 p.m. All right, it was from 2 to 2:40 or something, and it was so well received because we know that children. You guys are great. But we know that our children are thirsting, they're yearning to be able to see the reflection and see the reflection positively. Who's the founder of this entire week? Veronica Chapman. Here we have Veronica Chapman, the CEO and founder of Black Baby Books. Give her a round of applause because we would not be here without her vision. So we know Black Baby Books is exactly what you need to do. If you don't know where to go, who the Black authors are, just go to that site, pick a book, and there you have it. The whole site has been curated so that we see literature that is specifically designed to affirm our Black cultures. Go ahead, Yawa. You could talk about what you have been up to.
I mean, I don't know how I can follow up to that. Like, you guys are very impressive in terms of identifying the problem and coming up with a solution. But for me, it's really started in the art thing too. I mean, I grew up to Paris. I was going to museum like quite often. So as you know, or maybe some of you know, like in Paris, art is a big thing. Like it's a part of your education and is very centered around that. And I never had like a chance to be exposed to art by and with people of color. So what's happened really is like at the beginning of the pandemic. So previous to that, I actually had like a training at the MFA in Boston to be a gallery instructor. And actually, one of my instructors is on the chat, Tanya Nixon Silberg. So I want to give a big shout out to her as well. So we had like a really, I had went through the training, and the same thing happened. Like all the time, it was like art by and with like white people most of the time. And I was here like one of the only black person in the room as a gallery instructor. I have kids that are like really thirsty for art, but like there is nothing to really like expose them to that. So what I did is I created Kids.Think.Art, and some of the things that have been like very interesting is to see how kids are blossoming, like really creating the place where they belong. And actually the tagline of Kids.Think.Art is Kids.Think.Art, where belonging meets art. So it's really like about building that. And I just want to piggyback on some of the things that Dr. Charmain said. Like, I believe she talked about a sense of belonging and identity. I just want to give like few example of some of the things that happened during our classes. So one of the classes we actually looked through, worked through like a piece of art by Candy Wiley. It's John First Baron Byron. It's actually at the MFA in Boston. They have it over there. And so I was with a group of kids. We do classes all online. And one of the kids say, "Oh, like he looked like my uncle," and that's a big deal. Like that's a big deal. Like for the kids to relate to this art in this way and like recognizing like, oh wow, there's actually somebody who look like me or who could be my uncle or could be related to me that's up there in the world. So that's like one example of like some of the things that we do at Kids.Think.Art and why I really enjoy what I do and why it's so important to do that. Another example is actually work with a piece of art from Kerry James Marshall. The artwork is called School of Beauty, School of Culture. And so it's a scene that happened in a beauty shop where there's a couple of women, a couple of people like getting their hair done or so forth. And I've never noticed that on top, like there were an album of the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill on top of the door, like that Kerry James Marshall has like actually painted, like, and this was very tiny, and one of the kids in my class actually noticed it, and was like, oh wow, there's Lauryn Hill here. And I think it goes back to the culture, and that's why it's so like for us like really like providing solution to problems that we identify earlier. That's why it's so important, and that's why I'm very excited about like being with you here, like trying to find solution to issues.
Thank you so much. All right, you guys, this is the point where we're going to open up the floor. Come to step to the mic. If there's anything that you've said that has sparked an idea or a thought, we want to engage with you guys. I can continue to read some of the things in our chat.
And I need to jump in. And people can come up to the last thing I wanted to say in terms of, as you think about one of the things that books, media, all of these visual arts are a way of that we socialize, right? And so think about racial socialization. These are the early messages that we receive about ourselves and our identity. And so there's a researcher called Diana Hughes, and she has 4 strategies that people use to promote racial socialization. One of them is speaking positively about the culture and the heritage, right? And I think all of us on this panel do that, right? It's giving children a sense of identity and belonging. Another approach is preparation for bias. So this is where you prep them for things that they may encounter with people who don't maybe have issues with their skin color or themselves. And so it's about preparing, but also giving them coping strategies, right? And then I have those conversations. If people say this to you, here's how you respond, right? We can all connect with that. There's also a third approach that people use about promoting mistrust. And that's really being wary of other social groups. She said that one is the least helpful because it doesn't really prepare or give kids tools to navigate difficult situations. And they actually can create more anxiety, right? More fear. So that's one that we may use, but to avoid that one. And the other one is egalitarianism, which is said often is used by white families. And this is where we're all human, right? We all belong to the human race. And again, those are not helpful because it does not take into account the diversity that we all have and the beauty in our diversity. So one of the strategies says that cultural socialization, where we talk about the positive aspects of our culture and promoting our heritage, that is one of the most helpful things, particularly for children of color. So you're thinking about how do you navigate these messages. Those are helpful strategies. And as you think about the books and the movies and the film that your children across the age, developmental age, it's really important that you're sitting with them, you're interrogating things that you see, because I think we can't necessarily avoid, right? Because they're all there. But how do you help your children to think critically about what they're seeing, right? What are the messages that are coming through? So I'll leave there, and I definitely want to hear what other people have to say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. So while people are stepping up to the mic, one of the things that I have kept on thinking about is the Bechtel test. We've talked about how, for women, we were supposed to look at films and really think critically about what women talk about in film. So you have two female characters. Do they talk about a man? Is the film centered around a man? Can two women talk on a film where they're advancing the plot? And so I would like for us as parents and to teach our children to look critically at in a dialogue in both literature, TV, and film in that same way. Use a test. Can two Black children be in a film or in a book where they can, one, advance the plot, make a decision, where they're not antagonistic or fighting, where they can uplift each other, where they give some sort of negative truth. They're not some stereotype of a Jezebel or something else, where the plot is not centered on pain and suffering. We see a lot of films where in literature where it's grounded in pain, where it's something that's happening in the hood, something that there's a lot of joy in the hood. There's a lot of great things that happen.
Or we all don't live in the hood, right?
Yeah.
So what is the range of our experiences?
Oh, definitely, absolutely. We live everywhere. Thank goodness for the civil rights movement. We live everywhere, and so these are the kinds of things that we can't just drone on and let the film or the book wash over us without us filtering through and asking these critical questions.
Yeah, I want to jump on something you said, Keeana, about like joy, because I feel it's so important, and um it's so important in many ways. Like on the outside, or really what we do with Kids.Think.Art as well, is really focus on like situation where you see Black people doing normal things. Like it sounds weird or very trivial this way, but yeah, like moment enjoying like just normal moment of joy. And that's why and I think kids need to see that as well. Like it's and art has been like often enough when Black people are artwork, there's this pain that comes. Like,
We're having a little trouble hearing you.
Sorry, but is that much better?
Yes.
Yeah, there's this pain coming through, or there's like something problematic about that, which I guess it's true in some extent, but we also need to make sure that we focus on those moments of joy, like make sure that we communicate that Black people are more than like we're so many things. We could be so many things. We are so many things. So, and I feel it's important to really bring that story forward.
Yes, thank you so much. Stella, you're there. You can tell me.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I came across these books that the protagonist was a girl, brown girl, and the story centered around this girl's being passionate about music and loving the way she dressed, and she liked to be different, and she dressed in these like bright colors, and her mother and father and her siblings were all like celebrating her individuality. And ever since I came across these books, the series are called Ruby and the Booker Boys. And my daughter, for the first time, she saw herself in this character, because this character is a go-getter kind of girl. and she's not afraid to try something. And I even had a video where I recorded my daughter laughing so deeply and really into the story that you couldn't really get her out of it even if you tried. So that presentation, that aspect of she had read so many books and she loves reading, but this was the first time of me seeing her in tune with her character, with
Oh,
the character, and actually enjoying it to a point of actually getting out of the book and telling others about it and writing a book report on it, which was a very long and positive book report that she had ever written.
oh, thank you, Stella, for telling us. Can you give us the name and author in the chat so that we can,
Yeah.
yeah, that'll be great.
I have a list I'll probably share with you offline of different books that I researched about with black, brown girls leads.
Sure. I actually have a Google Doc that I'll put in the chat, and this is just it's just a resource list. You know, these are articles that I have found over time. These are articles by scholars and observers and journalists who are identifying the problem, and you know, we're all trying to find the solution. You can add to that list. You know, this is you know, it can be a living document. If you have other resources, if you have book recommendations or film recommendations, we can all begin to compile them so that we can really get a resource going.
And I think the thing that I would add to, again, bringing back, not to harp on the point of identity, I think, many of us are, again, I grew up in a country where, my teachers were all Black, except maybe for one. And so learning how to navigate this schools where my kids are one of few, right? That brings up a lot around kind of my own anxiety around, are they being seen and loved for who they are? But if you notice that your children are having some anxiety or issues around just their racial identity development, that's a place where therapy can help. It
Mm,
might be individual therapy or group therapy. So my business is a therapist of color directory. So I invite you to use that for yourself or even to find a therapist for your children. But having those group affinity spaces can be really helpful.
exactly. Thank you so much, Dr. Charmain. You know, my daughter, when she first saw Frozen, you know, I was like, it's a mainstream movie. It shouldn't be that harmful. For at least 2 weeks afterwards, she was phantom stroking her hair. She doesn't have hair that long, but she wanted it so bad, and it almost brought me to tears because I didn't. What do you do in those moments where she wanted to be Elsa or she wanted to?
Yeah.
What was I can't remember the other sister's name, but you know, you want to be able to tell her your curly hair is beautiful, and it's just as beautiful, more beautiful. I don't know the words. You're fine, but
Yeah.
you just wanted it, and it kind of dissipated when she kind of went on to another phase. I think Moana became the it person, but you know.
Yeah, Kiana, my daughter, same thing. I remember I was, doing her hair as I do every Sunday, and she was like, "I want an Elsa braid, like that Elsa braid." But
That's Elsa Braid, I know.
your hair doesn't do that. And I said, your hair's beautiful. It can stand. It can do this. It can, so it defies gravity. And she's like, what's gravity? But I just really working hard to have them love their hair. And it comes from media, right? Like it comes from what they watch. Elsa that period was painful.
Mhm.
Um, and I am so glad that Encanto and all these other new animation series have come out, and you see different characters. Thank God, because they get to see people with hair like them. I actually am looking forward to more and more brown, animated features. We haven't seen them in a while. I feel like there's been a push to do
Yeah.
more like which is great, but I'm looking forward to it, like going back to doing other black
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
there's a great question. Oh, in the audience. I know oh my God, the time went so fast.
I
If
know.
if we have a young writer in the audience, And if all the books, all the characters are black, is it okay to have a black villain if all the characters are people of color? Tato, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, you write your reality, right? Or you reflect reality. As long as for me, it's like I always worry about the protagonist, right? Like the main characters. As long as you have diverse voices in terms of if it's all black, it's like diverse voices, diverse perspectives. Yeah, I mean, like the thing about stories that it has to have conflict, and there's always going to be an antagonist. So it's okay as long as it's not a white protagonist and the black person is the one who's that is problematic. But I feel like if you write a whole story, then you have all kinds of blackness and all kinds of personalities in it.
Right. So having that range, right, and not just limiting or leaning too heavily on stereotypes and
Yeah.
stereotypical roles.
Hmm.
And that's all that we're asking. We're all
Mhm.
we're asking is for a 360-degree treatment, which is exactly what we see in other spaces.
Yeah.
It is okay to have the range. It is okay to be able to take someone and make them complex. It's okay to be able to show different sides of someone. It's okay to be able to show that that characters can be good and can be bad and can be all everything in between. It's
Yeah.
okay to have a protagonist that you actually don't like. It's
Mhm.
okay. There is so much room. Especially when you come from a perspective of abundance, there is so much room to be able to produce the kind of work that will connect to your audience. And so, if you want to be able to write a story where the protagonist makes bad decisions and that's great. Just as long as where there are stories where there are people who are making great decisions. If you want to write a story where there's conflict, that's great. There's stories where there is harmony as well. So we're wrapping up. This is 6:01. Thank you guys so much. I know that this is just really just the start. Um, One thing that we want to do is, I have and there's a second screen. This is why I'm looking over here. I have a link to a feedback form, and I really want you guys to give us your feedback. We want to be able to do more panels like this. We want to be able to continue this dialogue. We want to be able to not just rest on where we are now. We have got to push and push and push farther for where we really want to go. Are there any last in the recording? Yes, we can send the recording to people who have attended. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I have a last word, and I think one of the things that came up out of this panel is it's a lot of work. Like
Mm.
let's be honest about that. Thato went through like all the description, like all the research you have to do. Sometimes like some of the hotel like hide their face, so you don't know. It's a lot of work. And but like the one thing that I want you to know is like you're not in it alone. Like there's like many of us that's been like really charting that, sharing resources. On the outside, I'm curating like on the regular basis like old and new art that we can expose to our kids. Like there is people thinking about that, so please reach out if you have like any question in any of those domain, like book, art. We're here. We're here to help. Really.
Absolutely. I second that. We're all, on this panel, we all have ways in which we are addressing this issue through our own lens. So please follow, connect, subscribe. Yawa's Kids Think Art class is amazing. My daughter loves it. She looks forward to it every week. Tato has an amazing book for kids, but also has the art and the Sawa trivia game. Kidogo TV is amazing. So please come continue to elevate our work and share other resources that you're aware of that we need to know. So yeah, this is wonderful.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Have a good rest of your evening. It's a Sunday night. Tomorrow is Monday. We've got to either go back to work or go back to school or both. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your night.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.